Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to ISSS's Optional Practical Training or OPT workshop. My name is Riley Cook. I am the International Student and Scholar Coordinator, and I am joined today by Jeremy Spohr, who is our Assistant Director for Client Services at ISSS. We are going to kind of explain the basics of OPT today, as well as the application process for OPT. We'll also look at the timeline for spring and summer, and then I will pass off to Jeremy to discuss additional rules and considerations for OPT. So just to start off with the basics of OPT, the purpose of OPT is to apply knowledge gained in the classroom to practical work experience. This is really an extension of your F1 status and experience. That means that Penn is actually going to be the sponsor of your OPT period rather than the employer. There are two general types of OPT. The first is pre-completion OPT, which we won't go too into depth in this presentation because it's typically only something that's done in rare cases these days. If you do have questions about that, we urge you to reach out to your ISSS advisor. And then there's post-completion OPT, which would be done after your program end date, and that is what most likely the majority of you will be applying for. You can do up to 12 months per degree level of OPT total. Now, OPT is authorized by USCIS or U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, not International Student and Scholar Services. You're going to be responsible for sending in that petition to USCIS, and they will make the ultimate call. Furthermore, there's no job needed to apply for OPT in advance, so that means that you can go ahead and start with your OPT application process. And then once you're approved for your OPT, you would need to eventually obtain a position, and then you would report that to us. There are a few factors for your eligibility. First of all, you must have spent at least one academic year enrolled full-time in lawful status in order to be eligible for OPT. So that means if you take a leave of absence in those last 2 semesters prior to the OPT period, you wouldn't be eligible. That things are a little unusual right now in that we understand that there are some of you who have been abroad last semester, but if you're active in CVIS and if you've continued to be pursuing a full course of study and otherwise met the requirements for F1 status, and you meet that full 1 year eligibility, then that's not necessarily going to be a problem. You can always ask your ISSS advisor if you have questions. But again, because of the temporary situation with COVID-19 and being outside of the US, if you were otherwise meeting the requirements for F1 status, you could still be eligible for OPT. Employment has to be directly related to your field of study as well. And I'll get into the details of this later, but it has to be something that's closely related to your major. So what types of employment can you do on OPT? OPT employment can be paid or unpaid work. So if you have a volunteer position, if that's closely related to your field of study, that's something that you can report as your OPT. You also have to be doing at least 20 hours per week of reported work for post-completion OPT. So if you have a part-time position that is less than 20 hours, that doesn't mean you can't report it, but you do have to get up to 20 hours. So, you might have one full-time position, or maybe you have 4 part-time positions that are 5 hours a week that adds up to 20 hours. So that would be a fine use of OPT. Additionally, students can hold multiple positions, as mentioned, and you're permitted to change employers during that time. You just need to make sure to report it and that you stay within the allocated time of unemployment, which will be discussed later in the presentation. As I mentioned, the work that you do on OPT must be related to your field of study. We are sometimes asked questions from students, asking for exact clarification as to what constitutes a close enough relationship, or they'll ask, does the specific position relate to my major? Is it okay? Can I do it for OPT? We are not really experts in every single subject and field out there, so we really do need you to exercise sound judgment on this. Generally, my rule of thumb is that Your major should be something that's closely related to both your everyday work at your job as well as your overall job mission. And a reasonable person shouldn't question or doubt that. So generally, if you're still not entirely sure what type of job you should be looking for, you can review job listings. And career services is also a good tool to figure out, what types of jobs are related to your major, what types of jobs do students who do your major typically pursue. So again, just exercise your good judgment. The OPT application process is multi-step. It continues beyond even just the USCIS adjudication. So to start off, the first step would be to request OPT and IPEN. We will take you through the timeline for spring and summer graduates during this presentation. And then you would receive, the DSO would review that request and would recommend OPT in CVIS, and then we'll issue you an OPT I-20 to indicate that. Now, the student has to take that document, the OPT I-20, and compile other documentation and file an I-765, which they will send to USCIS. Then USCIS reviews it and will adjudicate it. So essentially, they issue a decision on whether it's approved, denied, or whether they need more evidence. Next, if all goes well, you'll hopefully receive your EAD card in the mail. You can start work on the day that's indicated as your employment start date on the EAD card. And you're also going to report that you received your card as well as any employment to the DSO, which for you will mean that you'll log into IPEN and complete the OPT reporting form. Next, if there are any changes to your employment, then you need to report that to us, and then your DSO is going to review that and report the address changes or changes in your employer, other substantive changes into CVIS. So now I'll look at the timeline for spring graduates, because I'm assuming that many people watching this or here now are graduating in the spring. The vast majority of you would have an end date on your I-20 as May 17th, 2021. The earliest date that you can start applying for OPT is 90 days before that program end date. So we have carefully calculated that to be February 16th. That's the earliest that you can apply for OPT. Now, again, your program will end on the 17th of May, and then the latest that you can apply for OPT is going to be 60 days following that, which is July 16th. Note that's the latest that USCIS can have your application. Now the OPT filing deadlines for summer graduates is going to be pushed off for their end date, which is going to be August 6th for most cases. The earliest application date is going to be May 8th, and then the latest OPT application date will be October 5th. Note that you can submit your OPT I-20 application a few days before, you can submit your OPT I-20 request in IPEN a few days before that initial application date. So just to give you some recent updates about the OPT application process, you should be aware that there is a new USCIS lockbox address, which is the current mailing address for your application. There's two different addresses for whether you're sending in your application via the U.S. Postal Service or UPS/FedEx. So please take note of that address difference. This is also going to be on our OPT checklist, which you'll be reviewing to compile your documentation and for further instruction. We advise you to set up informed delivery with USPS if you do use a USPS, which will allow you to digitally preview and manage your scheduled mail. So something to consider this year, especially with some of you potentially not being in the United States right now, is that you do need to be in the United States in order to apply for OPT. So for those of you studying remotely from outside of the US, you actually have to return to the US in order to apply. You have to make sure that you enter the US before your program end date, which for spring graduates, again, is the 17th of May. in order to be eligible. And if possible, we actually urge you to enter the US and apply for OPT earlier due to the potential wait times right now, or just to avoid any issues and delays. Additionally, when you're thinking about traveling back to the US, please pay attention to COVID travel restrictions and possible visa delays for those of you whose visas are expired. And keep in mind that travel restrictions are just a really dynamic situation right now. So please do your research before you depart. And also remember that in order to travel into the US right now from an international location, you do need to obtain a COVID test within a given amount of time. So just be aware of those things. So in order to request OPT, the first step is to read the OPT section of the ISSS website. There's an entire page on this. If you haven't read it yet, please review it. If you have, maybe visit it again. And then once you are able to, for spring graduates on February 11th, you can complete the OPT request e-form in IPEN. There will be a secondary approver that is your academic advisor. So keep in mind that once you submit the application, it has to go not only through ISSS, but also through your academic advisor first, which could cause some additional delay. You will have to pay an OPT pen processing fee, and you will be required to watch an OPT tutorial as well. So when you submit that OPT I-20 request in IPEN, it will be, as mentioned, approved by your academic advisor, and then it will have to go through ISSS. We expect that to take 3 to 5 business days most of the time. However, in peak times when our office is very busy, it can take 5 to 7. So we really appreciate your patience. ISSS issues a new I-20 with the recommendation for OPT, and then per SEVP guidance, we are going to send the OPT I-20s to you electronically, so via the email address that we have on file for you. You can print and sign the I-20, and then that's what you'll use in order to apply for OPT and send to USCIS. So in your application, you're going to need to include the form I-765 and compile all your materials. Please carefully review that document checklist. That's something that you can actually start doing a little earlier if you want. That way, when you do get your OPT I-20, you have everything ready to go. And then you'll mail your application to the designated USCIS lockbox. When you get your OPT I-20, please send it immediately via express or certified mail, and track the shipment and make sure you can confirm that it was delivered to USCIS. This is very critical that you send your application in very soon after receiving your OPT I-20, because USCIS will deny the OPT application if it's not received within 30 days of the date that ISSS issued the I-20. So if for some reason you get your OPT I-20 and you can't send it in right away, please let us know, because your advisor would much rather issue you a new one and not have you take the risk of having your application be denied. So the fourth step would be USCIS adjudication. The USCIS processing timeline, unfortunately, is fairly unpredictable. We've seen between 3.5 and 7.5 months, so applying early is a great idea. You will receive the I-797 receipt notice with a case number from USCIS. And unfortunately, there is a nationwide delay that we've been seeing for students who applied last semester or who graduated in fall of 2020. That is why there is now the new filing address at the Chicago location that I mentioned earlier in this presentation. And thus far, we've heard that there seems to be less of a delay, and so we hope that continues. Now, once you get that case number, you can use the case number to check the status of your application on uscis.gov. You may not engage in employment or training during the time when you're waiting for your EAD card or your petition to be adjudicated. Additionally, just note that if there is an issue with your application or if USCIS sees any need for follow-up, they may send you something called a request for evidence, or what we refer to as an RFE, during that period of time, in which case you will have you'll need to respond to that in a timely manner and submit whatever evidence they're requesting. So step 5, if everything goes well, is that you'll receive your EAD card. At that point, we'll ask that you scan your EAD card carefully and let us know if you see any errors or if you have any concerns so that we can follow up on it. And with that, I am going to turn over to my colleague, ISSS Assistant Director Jeremy Spohr.
All right, thank you very much, Riley. So listen carefully to some of the timing things. I'm going to talk about timing and travel and things like that, and that will hopefully answer some of your questions. A big thing about when can you start work. So you really got to have the 3 parts to be able to begin your work, and obviously the OPT's got to be approved. You've got to have the EAD in your hand to show your company's human resources people, and the start date on that EAD card has to be reached. So if you asked for July 1 of 2021 and you get your card on June 15th, then you still cannot start until July 1, which is the start date on the card. So consider yourself lucky. You got the card in time, and you can show it to your company's HR, and then you can start on July 1 as planned. So let's hope that you get your card in a timely manner, and once you get your card and you have your job or your anticipated start date, you must do the OPT reporting e-form and IPEN. We need to get the scan of your EAD card, and we will take this information and report it to SEVIS, to U.S. Immigration, and let them know, the student has got their OPT, they've got their card, we've got the start date, etc. That kind of information is all available. And the second thing is, at this point, when your OPT is approved, each of you will get an email directly from SEVIS, directly from SEVP, and they will ask you to create a student portal account that you can use to report yourself directly into SEVIS, and you should do that. The portal is very useful. It allows you to see information. It allows you to update it. And to do both, you need to report to ISSS and you need to use the portal. If you don't get the portal email right away, don't worry. Some people may not get it for, say, a month or 2 after their OPT is approved. Your OPT gets approved in June, but you might not get the portal email till August. But it's not spam. It's real. It's from SEVP, which is Student and Exchange Visitor Program. And you need to update that and update ISSS. Here's a little bit more timeline information about unemployment. So you are allowed unemployment time on OPT, and the clock begins when your EAD card begins. So again, let's use that July 1 start. So you have your card in your hand, your card starts on July 1, but you don't have a job yet. Maybe your job doesn't start until August 1st. So you may accrue 30 days of unemployment over the month of July, and that's okay. You've got 90 days. Then maybe in the future, maybe you have one job, maybe you have a summer intern that starts July, and you report that and you work at that, and then that ends the end of August. And then maybe you have 2 or 3 weeks before your real job starts in October. Okay, so that period of time in September when you're unemployed, you have to report that to ISSS and put it on the portal, and that will also add time to your unemployment time. And you really don't want to you can't go over that 90 days. You need to be employed when you're on OPT. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Some students, it's very rare, but sometimes students get up to they're at 80 days and they say, oh, I don't have a job yet. What should I do? And at that point, we would probably advise you, buy a ticket, prepare to leave the U.S. It doesn't look like you're going to be able to meet the 90 days of unemployment. But that's pretty rare. Most Penn students have a job or an internship or something like that so that they can continue to be in the U.S. On OPT. When you apply for OPT, you're probably going to apply in February or March. But that's during school still. Right? You haven't graduated yet. You're not going to graduate until May 17th. During that time, say from February to May, that's still school time. So you can come and go relatively normally. Now, this year, we're dealing with the whole COVID virus situation, so I would strongly advise you not to travel out of the U.S. Because who knows, they put up some other virus restriction or something and you can't come back in. Generally, we discourage travel when folks have applied for OPT. And I know that a lot of you want to travel, but we just generally discourage it. We can talk more about that in the Q&A. So here's some more examples on the slide. So before your program end date, that's before May 17th, again, you got to be in the U.S. to file it. You're going to send it in to USCIS using, we would recommend that you use UPS or FedEx or DHL so you can track it very carefully that it gets there. And then once you know it's there, and hopefully you will get a text or an email back from them that it's been receipted, then theoretically you could leave the U.S. again and re-enter before May 17th. So that's in a normal year. But again, with COVID, we really don't recommend that traveling out. Once you're here, if you arrive for this semester or you arrive in February or March, you really need to plan on staying in the U.S., I think, probably until July or August when you start work. It could be very difficult to come in and out. We don't know. But the second piece of the travel timing is after May 17th. So after you graduated, then you definitely need some careful documentation to be able to come back in. And it's those basic 4 things. Definitely got to have a valid F-1 visa. Okay? You've got to have your OPT I-20. Got to have your EAD card, and hopefully have a job offer as well. And that's why we're encouraging you to, apply in February or March and then remain in the U.S. to await your card. And here's some of the risks of the travel specifically. So if you're out of the U.S. and you get an RFE, request for evidence, and you're not here to answer, that can be, that's a problem. You got to be able to answer them and give them what they might request. If your F-1 visa has expired, then you can't apply for a new visa without your job and your EAD card. If you don't have a valid F-1 visa, I would say you do not want to exit. It could be difficult to get a new one to return. Because remember, OPT is part of F-1. The other thing is, suppose your OPT gets denied. It's very rare, but it does happen to a couple of our students every year. If it gets denied and you're out of the U.S. after May 17th, then you can't reapply. Your F-1 is done. No OPT. But if you're in the U.S. and you're still within your grace period, then we can help you reapply. ISSS is still assisting you. And if it gets denied in June, we can go, okay, geez, let's check why it got denied, and quickly we'll do a new OPT application for you and you apply again. But if you're out of the U.S., you can't. So let's hope that your OPT gets approved. And you definitely want to talk to your employer about traveling after your OPT is approved. And then here we list the items that you want to have. You want to have you want to have your visa. You want to have your OPT I-20. You want to have your EAD card. You want to have your proof of employment. But, talk to your employer too. They're not going to be happy with you if you go out of the U.S. in June or July and then you have some difficulty returning to start work with them in August. We want to make sure that they're, at that point, you've got your employer to think about too. And some employers are fine with it, but some are not. Okay, so we're gonna touch on the STEM extension here a little bit. We're not going to go into great specific detail because this is just a general post-completion OPT workshop. But specific majors in STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, are eligible to extend their OPT for an extra 2 years after the initial first year. We have lots of information about this on our website. And your individual schools, obviously if you're in Cs, if you're an engineering person, then you're probably good. Other majors across Penn, it varies by your major. ISSS advisor can help you, and probably so can your academic advisor, to make sure that you are in the proper major if you want to go for STEM. Here's a little bit of a background about STEM in general. So you've got to have a correct STEM eligible major. You've got to have a STEM job. Your employer has to agree that this is a STEM job, and they have to fill out some documentation to help you apply. And they have to sign this documentation, and it will be retained for record-keeping purposes. You need the major, you need the correct job, you need the employer's input, you need the employer to be E-Verify. A lot of employers are fine with this. It's very rare that employers don't support it. Most of your big banks or tech companies or consulting or things like that, they're all very familiar with STEM. They will help you do it. It's not very difficult to do. ISSS will help you produce the STEM I-20, and then you apply for it the same as you apply for OPT. And you will not do that until next year, towards the end of your current OPT. Then you will apply for the extension. It's 1 year into the future. Right now, we're focusing on regular OPT, which everybody can apply for, and that's the initial 12 months of OPT. Another slightly divergent topic that we want to touch on is the H-1B gap extension. And the cap gap extension refers to the time between the expiration of your OPT, which would probably be in June or July, and the start of a possible H-1B that would be on October 1st. So some students, your employer will apply for an H-1B for you, and you're working for them on OPT. But then your OPT is going to expire on July 15th, but your H is not going to begin until October 1. So the cap gap is covering that 10 weeks or so of time, and basically what it does is it automatically extends your OPT until September 30th. And then you just continue to work on OPT, and then you become H-1B on October 1st. So it's pretty simple. We will help you print the new I-20, and it's automatically calculated by SEVIS. You have to do an E-form to request it. You have to show us that you have an H-1B approved. You have to upload that. And then usually we look in there, we look at your approval notice, and we just print you a new I-20 that goes until September 30th. That's a great option for people that have an H going. And again, your employer will have to help you with that. Not related to ISSS. Employer process. Okay, we got a few FAQs that we hope we've answered. I'm just going to run through them quickly to remind you of some stuff. So If you've applied for your OPT I-20, but you didn't send it in right away, and you're getting up to like 20 days, 25 days, you do not want to send it in. You want to get a newly signed one, because if it goes over those 30 days, they will reject it. So be prepared to send it in. Your EAD before starting work? Absolutely. Yes, you've got to have it in your hand, because you've got to show it to your employer. You're not eligible. You have the card, and the start date has arrived. Can you change your OPT request dates? Well, the answer is it depends. If you have not mailed in your application to immigration yet, then yes, you can change your dates. We will cancel it and do another one. But if you've already sent the package into immigration, then you're stuck with those dates. You really cannot change it after you have shipped the application to immigration. Really try to decide those dates before you ship it. Once it's shipped, you're committed. Can you cancel it? It's kind of the same thing as changing the dates. If you have not sent it in to USCIS yet, then yes, we just cancel it out of CVIS, not a problem. If you've already sent it in the whole packet, then basically no, you're committed. You don't have to use it, but you're going to lose your $400, and they're probably going to process your OPT anyway. So you really need to have a plan, or you send that in. It's difficult to cancel once you have shipped it. Well, I've already used 12 months in one program. Can I do 12 more months at another program? So this is related to the 12 months per educational level. So this is something to keep in mind. If you did 12 months at the bachelor's level, then you go back and get a master's, then you can do 12 more months. But if you get a master's this is a common combination, right? You get a master's in engineering, and you do OPT, and then you go back a few years later and you get an MBA. Then you can't apply for OPT again, master's level, because you already used master's level OPT. So it does get a little tricky sometimes, but just keep that in mind. It's per level. So master's to master's, bachelor's to master's, yes, you get another 12 months. Or master's to PhD, you get another 12 months. But 2 masters, no. If you used it, you used it at the master's level. What is your immigration status while you're on OPT? I hope you all know this, that you are still F-1 students, still the same as now. You're still talking to your ISSS advisor, whether that's me or Julia Carboni or Jiwei Huang Ma. You're still talking to your same ISSS advisor during OPT time and during any possible STEM OPT time, because you're still a Penn student, immigration purposes. Maybe working for Google, but you are still talking to us about your EAD card or your I-20, etc. So final thoughts. You've done one good thing already. You've attended the workshop, and you're going to listen carefully to the Q&A. We have lots of information on our website, and please plan ahead and keep copies of all your documents, whether that's passports, visas, I-20s, things like that. Continue to read the ISSS emails, because we are still working with you even after you've graduated and you've gone off to work in Amazon in Seattle. You're still an F-1 student with us, to continue to work with us and read our emails. And I want to put a plug in here about the copies of your I-20s. A lot of students, when you apply for OPT, you have to include all the copies of your past I-20s. A lot of students email us and they say, "Oh, can you send me copies of all my I-20s?" And we can, but it is really the student's responsibility to retain all previous copies of your I-20s for however many years that is. If you went to high school here, you went to undergrad here, you got a master's here, you got a PhD here, you might have 25 I-20s. It is your responsibility to keep those copies. And ISSS may have them available to you out of the database, or we may not. So please keep your own copies and locate them and keep them in a PDF folder or a paper folder.